Welcome everybody to this presentation on effective teaching tips and strategies. My name is Joel Corey. I'm an Associate Professor of Teaching Economics at the University of California, Riverside. This presentation is mostly for those graduate students who might be teaching their very first class ever, but anybody who's even been teaching for a little while might be able to benefit from some of these tips and strategies. So without further ado, let's get into it. When I was first starting out as a young graduate student myself, learning how to teach for the first time, I got a piece of advice from the former dean of West Virginia University College of Business and Economics. That's where I got my economic degrees from. He said the secret to being a great teacher is not as much about grades, but it's about letting your students know that you care about them. He says that he had overseen a lot of graduate students come through, looked at all their teaching evaluations, and he saw that there were some that gave nothing but A's, thinking that that would make them popular, but had the absolute worst evaluations that he had ever seen, just because the students didn't perceive that that particular instructor cared about them. He says in order for you to get good evaluations, in order for you to run a good class, students have to believe that you care about them and their learning. Right? And then one of my great teaching inspirations is Dr. Russell S. Sobel. He taught my first intro to microeconomics class that I took, and that's actually the class that got me to choose economics as a major and eventually choose economics as a career. So the thing about him was he was always just very enthusiastic in class. He was really great at presenting stuff in such a way that made me believe that not only did he really care about the material, but he was excited about it, and that got me excited about it too. Right? And then finally, Dr. Santiago Pinto is another one of my teaching mentors. I took my advanced microeconomics classes from him in graduate school, and just the way he taught was very clear, concise, thorough, and organized. Everything about his course was very organized, including the exams. His exams were very thorough. They always tested everything that he taught in such a way that, again, really not only tested your understanding of the material, but did it fairly. And so being caring, being enthusiastic, and being organized are the three main things that I think makes for a good class and for a good teacher. So with that in mind, we're going to talk about some strategies for success and being caring, enthusiastic, and organized. First of all, I just want to point out that when you're preparing a class, remember that you don't ever have to start from scratch. There's a good chance that someone at your school is already teaching a section of that class, and you can ask that person for materials or maybe even sit in on the class while they teach it. I actually do this quite frequently. If I'm finding out that I'm teaching a new class for the first time, or I'm thinking about teaching a class for the first time, I'll see if somebody's already teaching it and ask them if I can just sit in on that class and kind of see what level are they teaching that class and take some notes about not only what they're teaching, but what I might be able to do to maybe make that class a little bit better or add my personal touch to it. Right? So again, think about sitting in on a class that you're going to be teaching for the first time, or at least ask the instructor if there's any textbooks that they recommend, maybe a copy of the syllabus just to see what they're covering. Again, you don't have to reinvent the wheel here. Now, if the class is relatively new or nobody has taught it for a while, then you can always look up syllabi online for an idea of how to organize it. Right? So again, this class is chances are been taught somewhere, and you can look at different syllabi from around the country. Again, just kind of see what's being taught and how it's being organized. With that in mind, when you do teach a class for the first time, you kind of want to map out your course in advance. And you want to create a map for your course and maybe illustrate it to your students in a way that is personal to you. And I'll give you an example. So I got really into hiking a while back. It's a great thing to be involved in here in Southern California. There's a lot of different mountains you can climb and hike up and things like that. Right? So I decided to organize my class as a mountain to be climbed. Right? So I call it climbing the economics mountain. And in this particular case, it'd be climbing the microeconomic mountain. And so again, I mapped out this course in advance in terms of this is what I plan to cover in the quarter. And I tell this is the very first slide that I show my students at the beginning of chapter 1, telling them that they're starting out here at the base of this economic mountain that we're going to be climbing throughout the quarter. And so chapter 1 and 2 are kind of the first section that I expect students to cover. So after those first two chapters, at the beginning of chapter 3, I showed this slide, right, saying that, hey, we've conquered that first base camp. Now it's time to tackle our next unit here on markets and government. Right, so again, this is the first slide of chapter 3. Notice that the background slides have a color that matches the section of the mountain that they are climbing. And then at the very beginning of chapter 7, I start off with this slide, again showing students kind of where we've gone and where we're headed. right? Again, notice that the background colors have changed to represent that section. And then, of course, when we get to the beginning of chapter 9, right, this is the first slide that shows up. And then finally, the very last slides of the class is this ending slide showing that we have conquered this economic mountain. So we started from the bottom, now we're here, right? And then as students exit, I say, hey, thank you. This is a picture of me at the top of Mount Kilimanjaro, just kind of saying, hey, we made it to the top. Congratulations, right? And thank you for all your attention this quarter. So something like that can be a nice way to kind of keep students informed about kind of where they are in the class, what they've covered, and what's coming next. Right. Now, the next thing that I always suggest doing is sending out a pre-class email. Meaning that before the very first class of the quarter is scheduled to start, you send out an email kind of welcoming students to the class, telling them that you're looking forward to being their guide on this economic journey. That kind of fits with my mountain climbing motif. And then let them know that you're always eager to answer any questions they may have, and they're always welcome to ask you those questions as you move through the class. Always say our first class is on this day at this time in this room, just to make sure that students know for sure where the class is meeting, and tell them that the syllabus is located on the eLearn Canvas course site if they like to look through it in advance of that first meeting. Right, so again, it's just something you send out to students to let them know that you're kind of with them from the very beginning. If my class were to start on, say, Monday, I might send out this email on either the Sunday night or the Sunday before, or maybe even that Friday before that Monday, anticipating that they might not be checking their emails over the weekend. Here's some typical responses I've gotten to that email. One of which is just want to say that I'm very excited for your class this quarter. Again, these are students who are already engaged even before the first class starts. And of course, this is another one that I usually get is how much are we going to be using this textbook this quarter, and do I really need to buy them? That's something that I usually say for my first day speech, right? But again, there's some students out there who might be looking to buy those textbooks in advance. And here's another hint for you. I would try to make the class as cheap as possible and try not to make too many things required for students to buy, right? Especially if you're not going to have them use it too much throughout the quarter, right? So for example, in my class, all the exams and quizzes come from my lecture notes, and any readings that I have students that I want students to read, I have them posted on Canvas so they don't have to buy any of them or look them up or anything like that, right? So I really try hard not to make the students buy any textbook or software or anything like that, so that their cost to come into class above what they've already paid for is zero. Right? I definitely would not require them to buy something that they're only going to use like once or twice throughout the quarter. Right? So with that in mind, again, if you're going to have them be following along closely with that textbook and doing assignments out of that textbook throughout the quarter, then again, it might be okay to have them buy it. But if you're like me and all the assignments that you want them to do are posted on the course management system and they don't necessarily need the textbook to do well in the class, then I tell them that the textbook is not required, but rather optional, right? If you're looking for additional resource, we will be covering things from this particular textbook. Having said that, everything on the exams and quizzes are going to come from my lecture notes, and most students do well without actually having to use the textbook. Another thing that you want to do is you want to make yourself very approachable. And a way to do that is with the language on your syllabus. So I have a little disclaimer under my instructor information, which includes my office number and phone number and student hours and things like that. And I say that email is the best way to get a hold of me as I check it frequently, but please feel free to call me or stop by my office. If my student hours don't work for you, then we can make an appointment to meet at a time that better fits your schedule. Now, I started just recently calling my office hours student hours based on a tip I got from a presentation at a teaching conference where that particular presenter said that if you're at a school like UC Riverside where you have a lot of students who are first in their family to go to college, then they might not necessarily know what office hours means. Office hours sounds like a time where you're going to be working in your office, and they may think, well, I don't want to bother them when they're working in their office. If you call them student hours, then they realize that that is time that's set aside for them, right? So student hours might be more likely to get those students, particularly those who might be, again, first in their family at a university, to come see you and get the help that they need. So I started trying to change the language on my syllabus and in my presentations from calling from office hours to student hours. Right. I also put a suggestions for studying section on my syllabus, and at the end of that said, finally, please feel free to see me if you are lost or have any questions regarding the class. It is my job to make sure you get the most you can out of this class, so I'm always more than happy to meet with you. And when it comes to scheduling those student hours, I try to be pretty flexible in terms of trying to schedule them around your class time. For example, if you're teaching a class from, say, 11 to 11:50 in the morning, you might want to hold those student hours from maybe 9:30 to 10:30 in the morning, and then again from maybe noon to 1, right? So right before and right after class, because those are the times where you know students are going to be on campus because that's around your class time, right? Sometimes it might also help to hold some hours a little bit outside your class time as well, just in case students try to bunch up their classes together. But I found it's usually best to have those student hours around your class time because that's when students are going to be more likely to come talk to you. Of course, the more student hours, the better, but definitely don't schedule any student hours that you can't maintain throughout the quarter. There's maybe nothing more corrosive to your student morale than having a scheduled set of student hours and then not being there for when your students show up to come see you, right? So again, schedule student hours and make sure that they are around your class time, and of course, make sure that you are there for those student hours. Some other things that you might want to include on your syllabus is if you plan to have a strict grading scale, make sure you include that grading scale on the syllabus. Also, a description of the assignments with clear due dates set out so that students know exactly when things are due and can make their schedule or put them on their calendar at the beginning of the quarter. I always found it best to have kind of an attendance policy and a kind of a classroom etiquette section to kind of tell students what I expect from them in terms of attendance. Again, I always put a suggestions for studying section on the syllabus because I get a lot of emails from students asking me, how would you recommend studying or preparing for your course? And I always tell them, well, I have a section of the syllabus that explains exactly what I'm looking for. Make sure you check that out and let me know if you have any questions. Always include a course outline, which is kind of a tentative schedule of things that you plan to cover throughout the quarter. A list of important dates to remember is always something that I put in there that has, again, due dates for all their assignments, including their exams. Always include an academic integrity statement telling them that I expect them to be academically honest and the consequences if they're not. I always have a student with disability statement pointing out the resources that are available for the Student Disability Resource Center located on campus and telling them that I'm always willing to accommodate any SDRC accommodations that they may have. And then I also started doing this during the pandemic. I put down some resources for struggling students. This includes the Student Wellness Center, psychological counseling services that the campus offers, right? I think during this time, it might be a good idea to have those things on your syllabus. One is, again, it helps demonstrate to students that you care about their mental health and well-being. And another is, again, there might be students who face various situations this quarter where they might need to contact those resources. And again, they might remember seeing them on your syllabus and realize that those sources are available to them. Again, in the interest of showing how much you care about your students, you want to definitely get to know them. And I know this can be a daunting task if you're teaching a lot of students, like if you have one of those sections that has over 500 students in it. But even with those sections like that, I still do this. I put together a first day survey where I kind of get to know my students in terms of what interests them. Right. So again, if you're doing a large class, like 500 people, you can actually create this survey through Canvas. But if you have a small class of maybe 20 or 30 students, it might be a little bit more personal to just have them fill out a sheet of paper at the beginning of class. But through this first day survey, I kind of asked students what interests them. So I asked them kind of what year are you in school? Have you ever taken an economics class in college before? Because if I'm teaching, say, Econ 3, they may have had Econ 2 and they may not have. I don't necessarily know that without, again, gaining that information. I also asked them things like, what are your favorite movies? What's your favorite type of music? What's your favorite musical artist or band? What's your favorite television show? What might be your favorite book? I might ask them, do you have a job? What kind of job do you have? What's your future career goals or ideal dream job that you might want to pursue one day? And then I asked them again, do you have any hobbies? What are some things you like to do in your spare time? And then ask them a question about if they're worried about the class. How do you feel about this class? Are you worried? Are you excited? Indifferent? And tell me why. And then again, I'll make some examples or questions to kind of meet those patterns. For example, if they have a similar kind of favorite movie, if there's one movie that a lot of students are reporting as their favorite movie, I'm going to try to make an example using that particular movie. Or again, if they have a favorite television show that everybody's watching these days, like when that show Squid Game was really popular, I might try to make an example off of that show as well. Right. And then I also keep these surveys in my office so that whenever a student sends me an email or tells me that they're coming to my office for student hours, then I just quickly look at the survey and see what their interests are and use that to kind of better reach them. right? So if I get an email from a student say, hey, I'm planning on coming to your office today to ask you some questions, I'll again look up their survey real quick, kind of see what their favorite movies or music is, maybe strike up a quick conversation about a movie if it's something that I've also seen or enjoy, and then again maybe make an example out of it if it's something that I kind of matches what they're asking for that particular question that quarter. All right. So again, that's one of the things that you can do. And then another thing that I recommend is, in terms of staying enthusiastic in front of your class, is to break up lectures with interactive activities. Now, in both small and large classes, you can do this with poll everywhere questions. If you are interested in using poll everywhere questions, they're pretty simple to make. I'll have another video coming out with how to make questions using poll everywhere, so you can check that out and kind of see how that works, right? But again, it's something I recommend that you do to kind of break up the monotony of just you up there talking for 50 or 120 straight minutes. In either a small or a large class, this can work. I'll give you an example of some questions that I might use. So here's a law of comparative advantage question that I might make a poll everywhere question. And this question comes straight from the publisher's test bank. It says, Kelly is an attorney and also an excellent typist. She can type 120 words per minute, but she is pressed for time because she has all the legal work she can handle at $150 per hour. Now, Kelly's friend Todd drives a taxi and would like some typing work, but can only type 40 words per minute. According to the law of comparative advantage, Kelly should hire Todd to do her typing if and only if his wage rate is less than. And then these are the choices they can select from using their phone, answering one of those poll everywhere questions. And again, the answer here would be $50 per hour. Now, again, this is the question that comes from the publisher. Based on the other tips I've given you, if I've asked that first day survey and I've looked through them and I've seen what their favorite movies are, I might take a commonly or frequently reported movie and kind of change this question to match that movie. So I'm going to take the exact same question, I'm going to match it to, say, a typical response on that first day survey. So let's say the movie Legally Blonde was one of the favorite movies from the student surveys that I looked at the beginning of the quarter. Then again, I'm going to take that very same question and I'm just going to change the names. And all of a sudden this becomes a Legally Blonde movie question and students are much more enthusiastic about answering it. So again, all I did was change the words Kelly, or the name Kelly, to Elle Woods, and then change Todd to her ex-boyfriend Warner, and it's pretty much the exact same question, right? But now it's kind of a interesting or nice reference to that movie that students who have seen that movie are certainly going to appreciate. Now, you don't have to have watched the movie, as it turns out in this particular case, I have seen this movie, right? But you don't have to have watched this movie in order to make this question. All you gotta do is go to a Wikipedia site about the movie and just look up a brief summary about the movie and look up what the names are. And again, you can kind of make this question a movie that relates, or a question that relates to that movie pretty easily. Right. Let's say that the most commonly reported or frequently reported favorite movie of that particular quarter from those students was Ghostbusters. Well, again, I can change that question to a Ghostbusters question, right, just by changing the names and changing the story a little bit. So instead of Kelly being a lawyer, Winston is a Ghostbuster and also an excellent typist who can type 120 words per minute, but is pressed for time because he has all the Ghostbusting work he can handle at $150 per hour. Janine is a secretary who would like some typing work, but can only type 40 words per minute. So according to the law of comparative advantage, Winston should hire Janine to do the typing if and only if her wage rate is less than. Again, a very similar question, just using ghostbusting instead of lawyering, and again, using names from the Ghostbuster movie. All right. Here's an example of when a student came to my office saying that they're having trouble understanding this idea of cost-benefit analysis. Right? I looked at their survey and I saw that Die Hard was one of their favorite movies on that survey. So when that student came to my office, I had these Die Hard questions ready. Right? Again, I've seen this movie. It's been a while, but again, just looking it up on Wikipedia, I can make this question pretty easily. It says that John McClane has a limited amount of time to find and defuse a bomb located in the building. There are two hallways he can use to get to the bomb. The first hallway is longer and will take 15 minutes to get to the bomb, but it has only 2 bad guys standing guard. The second hallway is shorter with only 5 minutes to get to the bomb, but there are 4 bad guys in the way. Right, so again, what are the marginal costs and marginal benefits of taking hallway number 2 over hallway number 1 might be a question I would ask. Or if John McClane had 15 bullets left and only 10 minutes until the bomb went off, which hallway should he choose? Or if John McClane had only 3 bullets left, but 30 minutes until the bomb went off, which hallway should he choose? Right? And again, kind of get the idea of looking at marginal benefits and marginal costs and engaging in cost-benefit analysis using a question that, again, the students is probably going to find interesting. And again, they're going to be somewhat impressed and happy that I was able to relate this question to their favorite movie that they listed on that survey. Right. So again, those are some good strategies for kind of being enthusiastic and using interactive activities either with Poll Everywhere or when a student comes to your office. Right. Now, in smaller sections, you don't have to get as advanced with Poll Everywhere if you don't like to embrace that technology, right? You just have students answer questions in the middle of class on a piece of paper. Again, there's a couple strategies for this. If you're somebody who likes to have a lot of open-ended discussions in your class, then you can ask questions that are going to be related to that open-ended discussion and then engage in a session about answering that question, engaging in a back-and-forth conversation with your students. One of the classic examples of kind of student engagement is what's known as think, pair, share. This is where you ask a question of the student, have them respond to that question by, again, writing their answer on a piece of paper, then getting together with another student in the class and talking about their particular answer with that student. And then after those students have kind of discussed their answers together, then they share with the class kind of the knowledge they've gained not only from thinking about the question themselves, but talking about it with their fellow classmates, right? And then another thing that you can do is if you are teaching maybe a more advanced class and there's a series of calculations you expect students to be able to do on the exam, have them practice it first using one of these kind of interactive activities where they just answer this question on a piece of paper and then maybe turn it to you at the end of class. I'll give you some examples of these questions. So when I'm teaching environmental economics, which is a more upper division econ class, right, I might ask what I call thought-provoking attendance questions, where again, I just have students answer these questions on a sheet of paper that they submit at the end of class, and then I just give them credit as long as they submitted some answers that are related to the question. So the first question says, in an effort to reduce the population of cobras in New Delhi, India, the government enacted a cobra bounty where they gave people the equivalent to $10 per cobra head in an effort to incentivize people to kill cobras and get them off the streets. Do you think this policy was successful in reducing the cobra population? Why or why not? So this is one of those questions where I'll ask that question. I'll post this document up there on the document cam and have them answer it, and then kind of engage in a back and forth discussion with students about the incentives created by this policy and what they think the result was. As it turns out, this actually incentivized a lot of people to start breeding cobras in their homes, and then when this bounty was rescinded, people just dumped those cobras that they're breeding in their homes back in the street. It actually caused the cobra population to increase rather than decrease, right? Which is kind of an interesting result or outcome that students might not have expected, which is what makes it kind of an interesting discussion question. And then the second question there says, do you believe that human beings are primarily responsible for the climate change the Earth is currently experiencing? How much should we invest in trying to reduce climate change? This is something that, again, I'll have them respond to, get together with a fellow classmate, discuss it with that classmate, and then, again, bring it back to the a group discussion. We'll talk about people's responses. Now, further on in the quarter, when we get kind of into more of the calculations of maybe discovering what the optimal amount of emissions is in a cap and trade policy, I will have gone through an example of how to calculate that given two firms with individual marginal abatement cost curves, right? And after having gone through this example, I will then break that example up into these smaller questions here, A, B, C, and D. And then I'll go ahead and post that on the .cam and have students try to work through that, saying again in the middle of class, to break up the monotony of my lecture and give them an example to try to practice this on their own. And then after giving them time to complete this, we'll go over this problem together. And then as I go through it, I'll kind of ask students as we're going through each part, like how many students were able to answer part A correctly. And then I'll go through part B and say how many students were able to answer part B correctly on your own. And again, I'll do this because I want to see kind of where students are being able to answer these questions and then where they're getting stuck. And then I'll spend a little bit more time on the places where they're getting stuck. Make sure that they can do a question like this on the exam. And sure enough, I'll probably ask a question similar to this on the exam, just with maybe the numbers and maybe the story changed a little bit. Again, just make sure that they can do it. All right, so again, you want to make sure you get to know your students with that first day survey and adapt those questions, whether it be through Poll Everywhere or maybe just through sheets of paper to maybe some of the responses on that survey. But another thing that I do with that first day survey is I find out which students are most nervous and worried about that class, and I try to help alleviate their fears right away. So again, one of the questions on the survey is, what is your general impression of the class? For example, are you scared, nervous, excited, indifferent, worried, what have you? Please elaborate. And if you feel worried, please tell me why. And then I will go through and I will actually record all of the students there. I'll write down the names of all the students who are telling me that they are feeling worried or nervous about the class, and kind of make sure to send them an email saying, hey, don't worry, right? I'm going to help you do well this quarter, right? So I go through all the surveys, write down the names. And anybody who seems really concerned and nervous, I have this nice email written out that says, don't worry, be happy. I've gone through all the responses of this class survey, and if you're getting this email, then you indicated that you are at least a little bit worried or nervous about the material and or doing well in the class. I want to assure you that I am committed to helping you get the most you can out of this class as we progress through the quarter. If you ever feel lost, confused, or overwhelmed with the class, then please feel free to come see me, and I'll be happy to help you in any way that I can. If you can't make my student hours, then please let me know what time works for you, and I'll try to work around your schedule. I hope this helps put your mind at ease, and please let me know if there's anything I can do to help you. Right, so I always try to make sure these students feel at ease right from the very beginning. So if they fill out this survey on the first day of class, usually by the time the second class rolls around, I'll have sent out this email. Right. And here's some typical responses I've gotten to that worried student's email. So students will sometimes reply with responses like, thanks for this reassuring response. I look forward to learning a lot in your class. Again, these are students who are engaged pretty early on. It says, thank you for taking the time to write this email and for being so sincere. I appreciate it very much. I was a little worried, but after reading this email, I feel very much more at ease. I look forward to going to every class and trying my best. Thank you once again. Right, or it might just be a simple, oh, thanks, I really appreciate this email, or thank you very much, you'll be seeing me frequently throughout this quarter, right? So again, these are students who started out worried about this class, now feel a little bit better about it and know that you're there to help them. Again, this is you demonstrating to them that you definitely care about their learning. So again, let's go ahead and kind of review what we talked about so far. So we've set up an organized class through the course map and a nice detailed and organized syllabus. Right, we made a good first impression by sending that pre-class email, right, by giving out that first day survey, and by, again, sending those worried students that email, letting them know that you're there to help them, right? And again, we've used that first day survey to get to know our students and maybe make some questions that are related to their interests, right? Now, we need to keep the momentum going. Right, one thing that I do after every class is I email the class telling them, here's what we covered in our most recent class, here's what we're going to be covering next class, and by the way, here might be some quizzes coming up or some papers that are going to be due soon that you might want to start thinking about either completing or getting ready for, right? And so I post this in the announcement section on our eLearn Canvas course site so that it's up there for students to see, but students also get it emailed to them, right? Any announcement I post on Canvas gets automatically emailed to those students. Right. Now, this is not going to help keep students on track, but it's also going to help maybe reduce your time as a teacher, right? Because a lot of times if you're teaching a big 500-person class, right, again, even if only 5% of students miss class, that's 25 students who might miss class that day, and they might email you saying, hey, what did we cover? I just want to make sure that I keep up with the slides that are available on our Canvas course site. Right, well, instead of answering those 25 emails right after class, I'll send out an email saying, hey, here's what we covered in class, right? We covered these topics, which is consisting of slides 6 through 17 of our Chapter 2 class PowerPoint slides. So make sure you check those out before our next class if you missed class today, right? And then also tell them, here's what I anticipate covering in our next class if you want to start reading or looking ahead. So it's going to save you time in terms of answering emails in those big classes, but it's also something that, again, keeps students engaged, keeps them on track, and again, shows that you really care about keeping them involved or care about their learning. Again, always try to be as enthusiastic and interactive as you can in class through those interactive examples or creative questions like we talked about before. Also, I'm a frequent user of movie clips or music to help break up the monotony of those lectures. I'll give you a demonstration of that here in the next couple slides. Also, one thing that I like to do is I like to post a few practice questions for every chapter, usually around 10 or so, that are similar to but not identical to the questions that are going to appear on their quizzes and exams, right? Because this is a way for students to kind of test their learning, make sure they understand what's going on, and then when I ask them similar questions on the exam, right, they say, oh yeah, I know how to do that because I've done it before. Right, and by the way, I'd only recommend you testing them on what you taught them in the classroom if we're talking about an undergraduate class. In other words, I wouldn't expect them to do a whole bunch of additional readings that you also do not talk about in class and then test them on those readings. For the most part, anything that appears on the exam is stuff that I've gone over in the class. If I didn't talk about it in class, it won't be on the test. Now, I make it very clear to them that the practice questions I make available will not appear identically on the exam, so don't memorize the answers to questions, but make sure you understand why the right answer is the right answer and why the wrong answers are wrong, because again, I'm not going to ask you the exact same question on the test, but I might ask you one that's similar so that if you understand that question, you'll be able to understand the exam question. And then anytime before an exam or a major quiz, I'll make sure to send out a reminder email. In that reminder email, I might offer some extended office hours. And then I usually give a review session outside of class before the exam. And I always post a study guide. And that study guide doesn't necessarily have to be anything like too incredible or special. Just kind of a list of the main topics we covered for each chapter, just so students kind of can organize their studying from their notes as they're preparing for the test. One thing I know is that students like the idea of you being available to them right before an exam because they might have some last minute questions come up. So, for example, I have a class from, say, again, 11 to 11:50, and I usually have office hours from like 9:30 to 10:30 in the morning. I might extend those office hours from like maybe 8:30 to 10:30. So I give them 2 instead of 1 because I know that I might have a lot of students come to my office during that time to ask any last minute questions. Right. Or again, if I know an exam's coming up, I might give a review session a day or 2 before the exam. And I always post that study guide because if you think about it, right, when students are looking at 2 different teachers teaching these classes here, and there's one teacher who's sending out a reminder email, offering these extra office hours, giving them a review session, posting a study guide, and then there's another teacher who's not doing any of those things, right? Then again, this is going to be pretty apparent to them which teacher cares more about their learning, and that's going to not only come through in your teacher evaluations, but it's also going to come through in student performance, right? Helping them learn more, get more out of your class. Right. So here's an example of me using maybe music in class, right? So if I'm teaching Introduction to Macroeconomics, I'm going to have students calculate labor market statistics like the unemployment rate or the labor force participation rate or something along those lines. Right now, if you look at like textbook examples of how to do this, they'll say, hey, we're in econ land and here's the number of people who are unemployed or number of people who are employed in econ land. And as much as I love economics, econ land kind of sounds like a boring place, not just to me, but to students for sure, right? So I try to find a more interesting place as a kind of hypothetical example of where to get these labor market statistics. So in order to do that, again, I ask students at the beginning of class what their favorite genres of music are. If I have a lot of students report that hip-hop is their favorite genre of music, then I might reach deep into my early 2000s rap collection and come up with a place like Nellyville from the rap artist Nelly, right? Let's go, and then I'll actually post this slide here in class along with this quick video, or this quick musical clip. Let's take a listen.
Welcome to Nellyville, where all newborns get a half a meal. Son gets it and the bill, soon as they can reach the wheel. And all this time is the size of the age. Yeah, 1 year get 1 curd, 2 years get 2 curds, 3 years get 3 curds. So on into merge. Nobody living average, everybody jangle hang. Nobody living savage, everybody got change. Even the paper boy live out the back of a ring.
All right, so that sounds like a much more interesting place than econ land, right? And again, just breaking up the monotony of the lecture with a short musical clip like that, especially one that matches the student's interest in the genre, is something that they're going to appreciate. And then my very next slide is some statistics from Nellyville, right? So I give them total population, full-time students, people who are employed, people who are retired, stay-at-home moms and dads, those who are not working, including those who have been looking for jobs, and then ask them to calculate the unemployment rate in Nellyville and maybe the labor force participation rate in Nellyville, maybe using that poll everywhere technology, right? So again, it's just a simple example of how to calculate some labor market statistics, but one that kind of reaches into their world based on their responses from those that class survey, right? And also one that just is a little bit more spiced up and interesting and breaks up the monotony of the lecture a little bit. Again, keeping the class enthusiastic and engaged. Right. Now, this next piece of, this next tip or hint I have for you comes from, again, my dissertation advisor and teaching mentor here, Russell S. Sobel. He recommended when I taught my very first class to think about giving out a midterm teacher evaluation just to kind of get students' feedback in the middle of the quarter, right? Just so They just so you can see kind of what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong. And so I still do that with every class that I give out to this day, right? Again, if it's a small class, it might be on a piece of paper. If it's a really large class, I'll probably do it through Canvas, right? But I usually give the students a midterm teacher evaluation right around week 5 or 6, and then I'll make minor adjustments based on their responses, right? So I will provide you a copy of my teaching evaluation in an email that accompanies the link to this lecture video, along with a copy of my first day survey as well. Feel free to copy them directly, or you can make it your own if you wish. But I ask questions on there like, what is your favorite part of the class so far? And what is your least favorite part of the class so far? And what are your recommendations for improving the class? Now, just the mere idea that you're asking for their input demonstrates again how much you care. And I usually tell students that I get these teaching evaluation responses at the end of the year, the ones that you fill out for the university, but I don't get to see those till after the quarter is over and your grades have been submitted, right? Which means that I can't use your comments to teach your class better, and that doesn't make a lot of sense to me, right? It makes a lot more sense that I actually use your comments to teach your class versus using your comments to teach my next class. So that's why I try to do this midterm teacher evaluation, so I can take their comments and use it to improve the class that they're actually in. Right. And then I will actually consider making some suggestions regarding the comments that I get from those teacher evaluations. For example, most recently in the spring quarter, one of the suggestions was to include a list of formulas for every chapter on my study guide that I post before the exam. So that was something that I started doing as a response to that teacher evaluation. And students really appreciate it. Here are some comments that I got on my end of the year evaluations that are the official ones through the university, based off of the students appreciating those midterm teacher evaluations. Right, so the first comment there says, he takes student suggestions seriously and adheres his teaching style to best inform and help the student. Or, I've never met a professor who has taken the opinions of students so seriously and has been so respectful and humble to the class in my time here at UCR. I felt like an adult who was learning to genuinely learn and not just another kid that needs to do good enough to get by. Or, his examples were fantastic because they were interesting and portrayed real-life scenarios of the concepts we learned in class. Also, as a professor, he's fantastic at listening to students, hearing their feedback, and implementing it into the class, right? So again, students will really appreciate the fact that you asked for these suggestions. And again, you can use these suggestions to make your class better. I would also recommend being flexible and accommodating with regards to your grading system. So here's some policies that you might want to consider. So whether I'm teaching my upper division or my intro to econ classes, I have a policy that says that a higher grade on the cumulative final exam will replace the lowest score on their midterm exam. So, for example, in my intro to econ class, I have 2 midterms and a final. The highest score on the final will replace the lowest score on the midterm, including an exam that they might have to miss for any reason. Now, again, students really appreciate this policy because if they do bad on a test or if they have to miss an exam for whatever reason, right, the final exam will replace it. But again, this is a policy, that saves me a lot of time as an instructor because, again, in a class of 500 students, if only 5% of the students miss the test, right, then again, that's 25 makeup exams I have to think about giving. Well, rather than giving out these 25 makeup exams, I just tell students, don't worry about the fact that you missed a test. Yeah, you got a 0, but remember the final exam will replace that 0. So if you get, say, an 80 on the final, turns that 0 into an 80. Basically, it just shifts the weight of that missed test to the final. And so you don't have to worry about giving makeup exams. At the same time, students, again, appreciate having the opportunity to make up a bad exam score. Now, the other reason why this is a good policy is because it is typically the case of college students at least once every quarter to have an off day. Right, for whatever reason. Maybe it's personal stuff going on in their lives. Maybe they just had a lot of exams in a row that week or something like that. And maybe that off day happened while they were taking your exam in your class. Right, so they do really badly on the test. Maybe they get like a 40 out of 100 on the test. Right, but they're a good student. They did better on exam 2. They got maybe like an 80 out of 100. And on the final exam, they get like a 90 out of 100. Well, again, that 90 will take that 40, their lowest exam score, and turn it into a 90, which will severely help that student's grade and kind of help pull up that grade that they have in the class to match maybe what their grade really should be based on their performance later on in your class, right? And again, them doing well in the final demonstrates that they learned all that information that they didn't know for exam 1, because my final exam is indeed cumulative, right? And so again, this is good for the student in that, 1, it encourages them to work hard and really improve their grades in the class, but 2, it also kind of keeps them it keeps a good grade in the class possible for them, right, even if they don't do so well in maybe the first test, right? Because if a student's only got 3 exams in the class and they do bad on the first one, they're thinking, oh, my grade's already sunk, right? Maybe I should just drop this class, or maybe I I'm not going to try so hard because I know I'm going to fail this class, right? But now with this policy in place, they know that they're still in the game, right? If they do good on the final, it's going to replace that bad grade, right? Again, it's going to keep them engaged and working hard throughout the entire quarter, right? Also, I always recommend smaller, more frequent, low-stakes assignments rather than anything worth a huge percentage of their course grade. So rather than having, like, say, 2 exams worth 50% of their grade each, right? That's going to freak students out, right? Again, I might have 3 exams worth 20% of their grade and then have like 40% of their grade come from other types of assignments like weekly quizzes or unit quizzes or those poll everywhere questions, right? Or maybe discussion session activities, right? Again, these small, frequent, low-stakes assignments are going to keep students from freaking out about any one assignment that you give in your course. And then, again, if you're teaching a big class, I might consider a policy where you drop the lowest grade of a number of assignments. For example, I have my students complete 9 discussion session activities throughout the quarter, of which only the highest 6 count towards their discussion session grade. Right? That allows them to miss or do poorly on 3 of those discussion session assignments. Again, this not only helps the students feel more at ease in completing these assignments, but it helps you as an instructor avoid having to give makeups to a lot of students that's going to eat up a lot of your time. Right. So if a student emails you saying, hey, I missed this week's discussion session activity because I was sick, be like, don't worry, you're allowed to miss 3 of them before they count against you. Only contact me after missing those first 3, right? And then we have to worry about a makeup. And again, that's going to cause you to have to deal with a lot fewer makeups than if you have to give a makeup for every single assignment. It's also important, I think, to leave a lasting impression, right? So always send out kind of a thank you email at the end of class. This is about the same time that I post grades. So I'll send an email saying, you know what? I posted grades for everybody. So just check out your grade on Canvas. This is the grade that I'm going to be posting for the university. And by the way, I want to thank you all for being such a great class. Really appreciate all the effort you put forth this quarter. And I feel honored to help guide you on your economic journey. I always let them know that my office is always open and I'm more than willing to help them if they ever need anything in the future as they continue to pursue their own academic and professional goals. This kind of helps provide some closure for both you and the student. And again, it kind of lets them know that, 1, you care about their advancement even beyond your class. And 2, again, they might come see you for a letter of recommendation or they might come see you for advice about where to go to school. For graduate school or something along those lines. And again, these are students who might be looking for that guidance, and so you can kind of stay in touch with them, right, as you are kind of mentoring them throughout their college experience, even beyond that one class they may have taken from you. All right. Now, sometimes students will respond to that email or any other email with a, hey, can you bump up my grade? Now, that's up to you whether or not you want to engage in this policy where you bump up student grades. I have a very strict, I don't bump up any grades type policy, right? Just because I don't think it's fair to bump up some students and not others. So I always tell students that when final grades are turned in, whatever it says, that is your grade no matter how close you are to the next highest grade. Having said that, right, again, I want to make sure that students know that there's a reason why I do this, and it's just me trying to be fair to all students. So I take out some time to kind of type out a very heartfelt reply that I've been saved, and then I just copy and paste to any student who asks me to bump up their grades, right? Because I tell students all throughout the entire quarter that I don't bump up their grades at the end, but it doesn't stop them from asking. So I might get 20 emails from students at the end of the quarter asking me to bump up their grades. And again, if I'm responding to each email individually, right, then I'm getting more and more frustrated. I'm saying, look, I already told you I don't bump up grades. Why do you think you deserve to be bumped up and not other students, right? So instead of kind of getting frustrated as I'm typing out these responses, I have a very nice, polite response typed out in advance that I just send back to students, right? Copy and paste, right? And again, it's not it doesn't require me to get more frustrated right, as I'm answering these emails because it's just the same one that gets copy and pasted every time. And the email just reads, I'm sorry, but I do not change grades once all assignments are turned in and the final grades are calculated. I know it can be incredibly frustrating to be so close to the next highest grade and fall just short. I certainly understand the need to ask me to consider changing your grade. Every quarter there are good students, each with their own circumstances and personal situations, who try really hard and end up on the border, but it's difficult to make a subjective analysis to bump some students up to a higher grade and not others. The only way to truly be fair is to keep the same unbending scale for all students. I apologize for any inconvenience this causes you, and I wish you the best in your future academic endeavors. Please let me know if you have any other questions. Right, so again, when a student reads that, usually they understand, all right, yeah, I guess if he's not going to bump up everybody's grade, why should he bump up just mine, right? So here's the kinds of responses I get to that particular response. Something like, I understand, thanks for a great semester. No problem, I just thought it was worth a shot since I was so close. Or yes, I do understand, and thank you for the response. Have a great summer. And please wish me luck on my business project. I'm working super hard on it this summer. Hopefully you'll hear about it. This is a student who's involved in some business plan competition. And then that opens the door for me to say, hey, thank you for understanding. By the way, if you need any help with your business project, I'm more than happy to help you out with that. Again, showing that you are in their corner, even if you're not going to bump up their grade. So again, I'd recommend any email that you get from students, a common one, right, that kind of frustrates you, have a nice formed typed response that you can just copy and paste back to them, right? Again, make things a lot easier for you, and again, involve you taking out your frustration less on students. Right. So again, I wanted to emphasize the fact that you really want to demonstrate to students that you care. That counts. Here are some teaching evaluation comments I've gotten from my students. Dr. Job was a very enthusiastic and approachable professor. He really cares for his students and wants to always make sure that they understand well enough to be able to excel in his tests. He goes out of his way to best accommodate the needs of everyone in order to ensure their success. Or I love his enthusiasm. I've never seen a professor care so much or have so much concern for the success of his students. Right? He loved teaching us and you could tell. Or I thought he was always excited about the subject and ready to help anyone that was confused. So these are the kinds of comments that you probably want to get on your teaching evaluations. And these are the kinds of comments that you probably will get if you kind of follow some of these teaching tips and strategies. Again, it's really about being enthusiastic in the class, being organized, and showing them that you care. So with that in mind, in summary, here's kind of what we covered and some things that I recommend you do as you're teaching your first class, or if you've been teaching for a while, some things you can do to modify your class to make it more, again, kind of interactive or better for the students. So again, one, map out your course in advance and illustrate it in a way that is personal to you, right? Send out an email introducing yourself and the course prior to the very first class. Make yourself seem approachable on a syllabus that is detailed and well organized. Learn about your students through a first day survey and adapt questions and office hours to or around their responses. Also, I always think it's best to send out an email to any worried students, reassuring them of your commitment to their success. Use interactive activities and questions to help break up the lecture. Offer some extra student hours and maybe some review sessions around exams. Definitely at least post a study guide. They'll definitely appreciate that. Give them a midterm teacher evaluation and consider making some adjustments or concessions based on their responses. Right, it could be something as simple as giving them a list of formulas in your study guide. Right, if that's something that they ask for. Or again, they might ask for something like a practice test, and that's something that I've started implementing in my classes as well. As I'll post a practice test before each test as well. Right, stuff that again involves them maybe working a little bit harder, but hopefully learning a little bit more. Have flexible and accommodating policies built into your grading system. Maybe again having the final replace the lowest midterm exam grade, or again maybe dropping the lowest couple grades in a series of grades in your course. Have very polite standard email responses ready to reply to common and sometimes frustrating questions regarding course policy. And finally, be as enthusiastic as you can in every class, regardless of the time, day, or how many times you have taught it. And I always make these economic t-shirts and wear them in class. An appropriately themed economic t-shirt or two doesn't hurt either. All right, so that is it for this particular video. If you have any questions, just feel free to email me at joab.corey@ucr.edu. Again, that's joab.corey@ucr.edu. And I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have, especially if you're teaching for the first time and you're a little bit worried about it. Let me know, and I'll see what I can do to help alleviate those worries. All right, so have a great experience teaching your classes. Let me know if you need anything. Stay safe and healthy. Take care.